The clever move. Every month, Inside China, AI takes one theme and tries to show how China is building it differently. This month, it was physical AI. The idea that China's edge isn't in the lab, it's in deployed machines accumulating real-world hours at a scale no Western competitor has matched. We looked at the framework, the sectors, the companies. Now we go deeper. Once a month, we take one company that makes the argument concrete. Not a profile, a portrait of the technology decision, the market timing, the organizational gamble that, in retrospect, made everything else possible. This month, the company is DJI. It is the most complete example we have of what physical AI looks like when it actually works. And the story starts with a helicopter that wouldn't leave the ground. Movement 1. The Boy and the Machine. It is February 2005, and Wang Tao is standing in front of his graduate committee at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, holding a remote-controlled helicopter that will not fly. This matters more than it might sound. Getting into HKUST as a mainland Chinese student is not straightforward. Like, the university consistently ranks among Asia's top 5 in engineering, and Wang had already failed to get into Stanford and MIT before his professor, Li Zexiang, noticed something in a class project and pulled him into the graduate program. A master's defense at HKUST is a genuine achievement, and Wang's helicopter will not leave the ground. His committee gives him a C. He goes back to his apartment. He works through winter break. 3 weeks later, the helicopter flies. The story is usually told as a triumph. The more important detail is why it failed in the first place. The helicopter wasn't badly designed. It failed because Wang Tao had never actually put it in the air before the defense. He had designed it, and he soldered it, tested every component on a bench, and handed it directly to the most unforgiving test possible, a public evaluation without a single real flight. He built. In theory. The physical world told him immediately what theory had missed. That lesson, you do not know what a machine needs until it is in the environment it is supposed to work in, is the one Wang Tao would apply for the next 20 years. Not as a philosophy, as a method. He graduated. He posted his flight controller design on a model airplane forum, offering it for 50,000 yuan, roughly $7,000. To his surprise, people bought it. He moved to Shenzhen with 2 teammates, funded partly by his family and partly by a 500,000 yuan investment from a family friend named Lu Di, the only outside capital DJI would ever take in its history. They rented an apartment in Lianhua Village and started building. By the end of 2006, DJI had almost gone bankrupt. Most of the founding team had left. Wang Tao, by multiple accounts, was almost impossible to work for. Perfectionist to the point of specifying how many fingers to use when tightening a screw, and how many turns. Professor Li Zexiang stepped back in, brought graduate students, found more capital. DJI survived. For the next 6 years, the company barely appeared in public. It sold flight controller components to Chinese universities and state-owned power companies, the invisible infrastructure of machines other people were building. In 2011, at a radio-controlled aircraft trade show in Indiana, Wang met an American named Colin Gwynn, who was running an aerial photography startup and needed a way to shoot stable video from the air. They founded DJI North America together. And 2 years later, in January 2013, they brought a small white quadcopter to a photography conference in Las Vegas. Box 1. Inertial stabilization. The core problem Wang Tao solved in that Shenzhen apartment was inertial stabilization, the ability of a machine to know its own position and orientation in space at every moment, and to correct for disruption faster than any human can react. DJI's early flight controllers combined accelerometers, gyroscopes, and GPS into a single feedback loop running hundreds of times per second. When wind pushes the drone left, the system detects the deviation and corrects before the operator sees it happen. This is the foundational capability of every autonomous physical system, the ability to stay oriented in an environment that is constantly trying to destabilize it. Without it, nothing else works. Movement 2, the view from above. The conference was Photoshop World, not a tech event, not a drone expo. A gathering of designers, photographers, and the people who were just beginning to call themselves content creators. Wang Tao understood something about his audience that nobody had articulated yet. The people who most wanted the aerial view were not engineers. They were image makers. And the Phantom one, $629 flyable out of the box, was the first time that view had ever been available to them. Before it existed, getting a camera into the air meant one of three things. You hired a helicopter crew, which cost thousands of dollars per hour while you were in the military, or you had built your own rig from scratch, which meant months of engineering work and a high probability of a crash. The aerial perspective, that God's eye view looking down on a landscape, a crowd, a city, belonged to institutions. It was not something a person could own. What made the Phantom work was something invisible in the marketing materials. GPS stabilized hover. The machine could hold its position in space without the operator doing anything. Before this, quadcopters were notoriously twitchy, demanding constant correction, unforgiving of inattention. The Phantom just stayed where you put it. You could release the controls, frame your shot, and the machine would wait. That single capability, stability in physical space, is what DJI had actually built. The drone was the first thing it enabled. Now consider what was happening on the ground in January 2013. Instagram had 90 million users and had just introduced video for the first time. Xiao Hongshu launched that same year. A generation of people was learning that images were currency, that the right photograph could build an audience, establish an identity, start a career. Platforms were teaching hundreds of millions of people to compete for attention with what they could show, and the most striking images were the ones that gave the viewer a perspective they couldn't access themselves. Nobody planned this convergence, but the Phantom arrived at the exact moment the aerial view became the most shareable image on the internet and made it available for $629. A few years earlier, GoPro had done something structurally identical. The first-person action shot, the helmet camera, the chest mount, had always existed in professional, extreme sports films. GoPro made it available to anyone. 2 new visual languages, arriving within years of each other, at the moment the audience existed to receive them. GoPro gave creators the view from inside the action. DJI gave them the view from above it. Neither company engineered the timing. Both benefited from it absolutely. By 2016, the Mavic Pro had folded the drone to the size of a water bottle and effectively ended the consumer drone competition. No other company has meaningfully threatened DJI's position since. But the move that would matter most had already happened. Quietly, in 2014, inside a piece of cinema equipment, the Zenmuse gimbal was DJI's solution to a specific problem. Aerial footage was shaky, and shaky footage was worthless. The gimbal held the camera steady against the drone's vibration and movement. It worked well. Then someone asked the question that looks obvious in retrospect. If the problem is keeping a camera steady while something moves, why does the something have to be a drone? The Ronin replaced the mounting bracket with a handle. Same stabilization logic, a different body. A camera operator could now walk, run, climb stairs, and the footage would be as smooth as if the camera were on a track. A DJI didn't position it as a drone accessory. It positioned it as professional cinema infrastructure, a different buyer, a different price tolerance, a different conversation entirely. The Mandalorian used one. So did Yellowstone, Game of Thrones, Bird Box. In 2019, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences gave DJ a Technical Achievement Award for the Ronin 2. Hollywood had adopted a Shenzhen rig so gradually and practically that there was no announcement to make. This is the moment DJI stops being a drone company. It had built a platform, stability in physical space, and discovered the platform was broader than the product it had been built for. The drone was the first application. It would spend the next decade finding the others. Wang Tao, for his part, said almost nothing publicly about any of this. He gave one major interview in the early years, then went silent for a decade. No press, no conferences, no social media, while DJI's products flew over every continent and eventually over both sides of a war in Ukraine, where DJI Mavics became by far the most widely used drones on the front lines, deployed for reconnaissance and modified to carry explosives. Despite DJI's explicit ban on military sales and its announcement in April 2022 that it would stop selling to either country, the founder who built them had almost nothing to say. The late post interview that broke that silence was published 3 weeks ago. It runs to 20,000 words. It is the first time Wang Tao has spoken at this length since DJI became the most consequential physical hardware company in the world. We will come back to what he said. But first, the machines. Mechanical and electronic image stabilization. A camera moving through space accumulates vibration from every source around it. Rotors, wind, footsteps, breathing. Stabilizing it requires two things working simultaneously. A mechanical gimbal that absorbs physical shock through motorized counter-rotation, and electronic processing that corrects for the residual movement the gimbal cannot eliminate. DJI's ZenMuse system combined both, running a 3-axis gimbal at speeds that made the camera functionally immune to what the machine carrying it was doing. The reason this mattered beyond cinema is that stable imaging is a prerequisite for machine vision. A system that cannot hold a steady image cannot reliably identify what it is looking at. Every subsequent DJI application that involves recognizing a terrain feature, a power line, or an obstacle starts here. Movement 3, when the machine touches the ground. Rice is China's primary staple, and most people understand that at a general level without thinking much about what producing it at scale actually requires. What is less obvious is the labor involved at the field level, including pesticide application, which, until the mid-2000s, meant a farmer walking rows in the heat with a backpack sprayer strapped to their spine, covering one moo, about 667 square meters per hour. Multiply that across hundreds of millions of mu of cultivated land. Factor in that young people were leaving the countryside for cities at a rate that had been accelerating for 2 decades, and you arrive at a structural problem. The work that feeding China requires was running out of people willing to do it. Wang Tao, asked once about how DJI chooses which problems to enter, gave an answer that sounds simple until you sit with it. I know what I'm good at. Satisfying the interest of a group and doing it in a way that no one else can match. We are very cautious when we do something, but once we decide to do it, we want to be number one. Agriculture was that kind of decision. The capability DJI had built. A flight controller that understood terrain, a machine that could hold a precise position and execute a programmed path autonomously, could carry something other than a camera. The Agris MG-1, launched in 2015, replaced the camera payload with a 10-kilogram liquid tank and a precision dispersal system. The autonomy stack underneath was the same one that had been flying over photography conferences in Las Vegas 2 years earlier. What changed was what the machine was doing with its understanding of physical space. The results were not subtle. An agra covers the same ground that takes a farmer an hour in under 10 minutes, with more precise application and less chemical waste. The farmer's body is no longer in the field, no longer absorbing what the crop is being treated with. DJI's agricultural fleet now treats more land every year than China's entire farmland surface, because the same fields receive multiple passes across a season for different inputs. The competitor DJI displaced was not another company. It was a person carrying a tank on their back, autonomous waypoint navigation, and terrain following. Spraying a rice paddy is not a straight line problem. Fields are irregular, contoured, interrupted by trees and irrigation channels. Doing it by GPS waypoint alone, flying a pre-programmed grid, produces uneven coverage and dangerous collisions. DJI's agricultural systems added terrain-following radar, a downward-facing sensor that continuously measures the distance between the drone and the crop surface, adjusting altitude in real time to maintain consistent spray height regardless of what the ground beneath is doing. The machine is not following a map. It is reading the physical environment as it moves through it and adapting accordingly. This is the capability that separates autonomous operation from automated operation, the difference between executing a script and responding to reality. The same logic played out at a different scale in infrastructure. China Southern Power Grid manages 222,000 kilometers of power lines across 5 provinces, serving 254 million people. In 2015, it was inspecting 11,000 kilometers per year, done by humans, with helicopters, at considerable cost and genuine physical risk. By 2018, using DJI drones, that figure had reached 241,000 kilometers, 15 times the previous capacity, at a fraction of the cost, with on-site manpower eventually reduced by 85%. The engineer who used to climb the tower now reads data on a screen. When your solution is 15 times more capable than what it replaced, you are no longer competing on price or features. You are making the previous approach look like a different era entirely. LiDAR-based spatial mapping. LiDAR, light detection and ranging, like y'all, it works by firing thousands of laser pulses per second and measuring how long each takes to return. The result is a precise three-dimensional point cloud of whatever the sensor is looking at. A power line, a bridge, a construction site, a room, DJI's, enterprise drones combined, LiDAR with photogrammetry, the reconstruction of geometry from overlapping photographs, to produce inspection-grade spatial models of infrastructure at a fraction of the cost and time of manual survey. What made this consequential for physical AI is that a system which can build an accurate 3D model of its environment can also navigate within it, identify anomalies, and return to the same position on a future flight to measure whether anything has changed. Spatial memory, knowing not just where things are, but how they compare to how they were, is the capability that makes autonomous inspection genuinely useful rather than merely novel. Then there is Guangxi Province, 2021. A drone operator named Lai Zhongshin was using his agricultural spraying drone to ferry belongings for villagers displaced by flooding when he spotted a man stranded on a rooftop, surrounded by water, with no way down. He looked at his machine, built to carry pesticide, and made a decision. He flew it to the rooftop. The man grabbed hold. Lai carried him to safety. An agricultural drone carrying a human body. Nobody designed this use case, nobody wrote it, into a product brief. It happened because a machine built to understand physical space and move payloads through, it turned out to be useful in ways its designers had never imagined. And so, in the hands of someone who understood what it could do and needed it to do something else. This is the dual-use dimension of DJI's technology, stated plainly. The autonomy stack that maps a rice paddy can map a disaster zone or a battlefield. DJI has always maintained it builds tools for peaceful use. In Ukraine, both sides came to a different conclusion. DJI Mavics became the most widely used drones on the front lines, used by Ukrainian and Russian forces alike for reconnaissance and modified to carry explosives, despite DJI's explicit ban on military sales and its announcement in April 2022 that it would stop selling to either country. The drones were already everywhere. You can stop a sale. You cannot stop a tool that has already reached the hands of everyone who wants it. Where you sit determines what you see. The Chinese farmer, who no longer has to carry 40 liters of chemicals on his back, sees one thing. The Ukrainian soldier, who picks up a $2,000 consumer drone and attaches a grenade, sees another. Both are looking at the same machine. Movement 4, what DII is actually building. In the late post interview published 3 weeks ago, Wang Tao's first substantive public conversation in a decade, he describes DJI's internal product standard in one line. Average wisdom is worthless. The only thing with value is the delta above the average. It is a useful frame for what DJI has been doing since 2020. The Romo robot vacuum uses LiDAR-based room mapping, visual navigation, and AI obstacle avoidance, the exact capabilities DJI spent 15 years refining for drones, applied to a domestic floor. The Avinox mid-drive e-bike motor applies battery management and torque optimization developed for flight systems, where power efficiency is not a preference, but a survival requirement to a motor now inside premium mountain bikes from 12 manufacturers across Europe and North America. The Manifold 3, a computing module that delivers 100 trillion operations per second, mounts to DJI's enterprise drones and opens the autonomy stack to outside developers. Each of these is the same intelligence in a different body. The drone was the laboratory. Every surface that needs to be understood, navigated, or operated in autonomously is a potential deployment. Edge inference. AI computation at the point of action. The limiting factor in autonomous physical systems is not sensing or navigation. It is computation speed. A drone inspecting a power line, a vacuum mapping a room, a traffic management system identifying an accident. Each requires a machine to process sensor data, run it through an AI model, and produce a decision in milliseconds without sending anything to a remote server and waiting for a response. DJE's Manifold 3-module delivers 100 trillion operations per second from a unit small enough to mount on a drone, placing the inference capability at the point of action rather than in the cloud. This is what makes physical AI genuinely autonomous rather than remotely supervised. The machine carries its own intelligence into the environment, makes decisions there, and acts on them before any human is involved. The same principle now sits inside DJI's robot vacuum, its e-bike motor, and the platform it has open to outside developers. The intelligence is no longer tied to the drone. It is available to any physical object that needs to understand and respond to the world around it. On highways across Jiangxi province, traffic officers now respond to accidents without leaving the station. A drone arrives before any officer does. "We have taken photos and collected evidence of the accident scene," an officer announces through its loudspeaker. "Please move your vehicle out of the driving lane." The drivers comply. Traffic resumes. In Shenzhen, the traffic police run a fleet of 100 DJI drones. Although a 3D map of a crash scene that used to require 3 officers and 30 minutes now takes 15 minutes and 1 officer who never enters the road. This is standard operating procedure running daily in cities across China. Not a technology demonstration, not a program being evaluated for scale, but the way the job is done. The company behind all of this has never gone public, never taken a second round of outside investment, never answered to a quarterly earnings call. Wang Tao revealed in the late post interview that DJY's 2024 revenue exceeded 80 billion yuan, roughly $11 billion, with profits above 20 billion. He expects to cross 100 billion yuan this year. He is 44 years old, keeps 4 cats, and writes code as a hobby. He describes building products as a difficulty of 1 out of 10 and management as a 10, and says he spent 8 years learning that difference, raising the organization's capability score by his own assessment from 30 to 65 out of 100. He is still climbing towards 70, the threshold he believes allows a company to run without depending on its founder's personal will. He also completed in that interview the sentence that had defined how the world thought about him for a decade. In the early years, Wang Tao was known for one line: "The world is incredibly stupid, no context, no qualification." Like, just that, hanging there, daring anyone to respond. It became a kind of mythology around a founder who almost never spoke in public, gave almost no interviews, and let his products carry whatever needed to be said. After 10 years of silence, he added 3 words: "And so am I." The helicopter that wouldn't fly in 2005 taught him something that became DJI's operating method. The physical world is the only honest teacher, and a machine only gets good when it actually meets the conditions it is supposed to work in. He spent 20 years applying that lesson to rice paddies, power lines, film sets, flooded villages, city highways, and living room floors. The question this series will keep asking company by company, month by month, is the one DJI's ARC makes unavoidable. When a Chinese company gets the deployment density to make its machines genuinely good at operating in the physical world, what does it know that no competitor sitting in a lab can replicate? And what does it do with that knowledge next? Inside China AI. Inside China, i.substack.com.